Is everyone there? Hey. All right. Hi again. Let me introduce everybody again. Fazila, you are the amazing moderator for the day today, covering digital leadership readiness. We have an amazing panel on board. Mr. Ahmed Mohsen is there. Mr. Saqib Sabah is not there. Okay, Sabine is there. Sabine Kaliskan and Mr. Joe Espana. And as I mentioned, whoever is going to join, technically the panel can do so. So please, I'll leave the floor to you guys, and so you can start immediately. And we'll leave some time a bit for some questions, okay? The floor to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right, so welcome to our panel discussion on digital leadership readiness. My name is Fazila Gopalani and I'm the head of ACCA for the Middle East, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. And I'm going to be your moderator today. So ACCA is a global body of professional accountants founded in 1904 in the UK, offering business relevant first choice qualifications to people of application ability and ambition. So a little bit about this topic. The old management models and the old companies are coming crashing down now. And what we can see is that traditional modes of operation that worked for decades and built small companies into global giants are no longer fit for purpose. Only those that truly transform their digital processes from the ground up will survive. Now consider Nokia. Once one of the world's leading providers of hardware, leading the mobile phone market. Following the disruption of their industry led by Apple, they sold their mobile devices division and transformed into one of the world's biggest wireless network providers. So digital transformation is not about riding out a storm and hoping it's going to pass. It's about embracing change and accelerating it. New digital services, from automation to the Internet of Things to cloud services to outsourced applications, provide opportunities for efficiency and growth. Now, we know that digital transformation isn't easy. It doesn't happen overnight, but it is essential to both future leadership capabilities and organizational health to get started. So, during this panel discussion, we're going to be hearing from esteemed panel from diverse backgrounds all over the world. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. So our first panelist that we have is Saqib, who is the COO of SAP. We've got Sabine Kaliskan, CEO of People at Right Place. We've got Joe, management consultant at Performance Equations. And we have Ahmed, the legal specialist in corporate and commercial law. So without further ado, the first question I know is going to be time constrained, so I'm going to put this question out to Saqib. In your view, who is responsible for digital transformation in an organization? You're on mute. Mute.
Yeah, thanks, Fazila. Thanks a lot. Right. So, I would take the advantage of the word that you use, responsibility, and will simplify the question for me. Because had you used the other word, which is accountability, that's more difficult from my perspective. So, I think responsibility element, and you touched upon in your preamble that you've given, is digital transformation is not about not about technology. It's not about an overnight change. It's about a journey that you have to go through. And there are several functions in the organization which I believe are responsible to drive that change. If we ignore the accountability, who is accountable for it? Let's talk about what are the key functions which is essential or an important part of the entire journey which ensures the success. So the first thing is the business strategy. I don't think without a business strategy you can achieve anything. The second thing, in my understanding, is a data strategy. We know the data has to be kept in the center when you're driving the digital transformation journey, and without data being an integral part of your strategy, it's almost hard to believe that you will have any success out of it. And the third important element, which you've touched upon in your introduction, is also the skill set. So human resources, the talent, and ensuring that they are able to capitalize on the opportunity, respect to the tools, respect to the capability, the new way to do things, all of that is extremely important. So talent and right human resource, the human capital, in my understanding, is the third ingredient. The fourth important pillar is the tool and technology. So yes, it's not the only thing, but it is one part of the pillar that makes your strategy successful. And last but not the least is the process. So how will you connect all of these functions together to create a value addition in each of the value chain and come to the output and do it in a repeated manner? So I give you a small example. I know we are running short of time, but it will be quite useful. So for example, a bank identifies an opportunity in a subprime segment, which is a very high risk market to go after. But then there is a micro lending organization which is digitally enabled, capitalizing on that opportunity. So a bank's differentiation is not to go after in the same way as the other micro lending companies. The value for the big bank is that they've got a huge amount of data and the talent with them. And if they're able to capitalize these two things, they will be able to get ahead of the curve from some of these new startup companies which are really disrupting the game. So in my understanding, I don't think there is one responsible party in the organization. There are various functions that collectively forms the winning strategy, and that needs to be kept in the center.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I know you've got 2 more minutes left before you need to rush off. So I have one particular question for you, seeing that you are actually a COO of SAP. There's a lot of, so which leadership role is actually accountable for digital transformation, the CIO or the COO?
Right, I knew it was coming because the accountability word was certainly cleverly placed, I should say. So this is a very tricky question. You see, Fazila. In my understanding, I think there's no right or wrong answer. Right. So there's no COO, there's no CIO. You may have heard the chief digital officers. You may have heard chief data officers. You may have heard chief transformation officers as well within the organization driving the change. So I think what we need to understand is that, look, the ingredients that we just talked about, how do we make sure that the right capability within the organization, and it varies from organization to organization, it may be the CIO, it may be the COO, it may be the CFO, who have got that potential to be able to execute that big organizational change and drive the opportunity towards measuring the results as well. So I don't think there is any one particular answer to that. It depends on organization to organization.
Okay. Yeah. So the
as
is there.
the prime responsibility. Yeah.
I think you guys are cutting off.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Better.
Yep. I think that it was cutting off a bit, the internet connection, the world of technology that we live in. Thank you, Saqib. Thank you for those 2 answers and your point of view and perspective. Appreciate that. If we move on to Joe now, what is the actual role of leadership in digital transformation, in your opinion, as a management consultant?
It's a massive question, actually, because I think the two things come to mind. First of all, in my experience, I don't think that leaders spend enough time investigating what they mean about digital transformation, because the clue is in the word itself, transformation. This is not, let's work on the caterpillar so that we have another caterpillar. We want to work on the caterpillar so we have a beautiful butterfly. So it's completely different. And I think that the role of senior leaders, initially at least, is to, first of all, their mindset, which says this is not simply another project. This is This is going to be holistic to the entire organization. It's going to touch every part of it. And very much, as Saqib has mentioned, the whole notion of the internal value chain. So, the breaking down of silos and how various parts of the overall operation works with each other. So in order to address that, I think that the role of leaders is to have a thinking framework first around this whole notion of the digital transformation. So digitizing products and services, digitizing the whole operation and its connected parts, digitizing the operation, obviously, and obviously digitizing, if that's the way they want to go, the entire customer experience. So this framework is a thinking framework that they need to really, their responsibility is to work on that first, and how that plays out with their aspired strategy, business strategy, before they actually define goals and objectives. And I guess once they've got some of those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle in place, the role would be very much like any major change in any organization. So defining the change, aligning people, giving them strong messages about why we're doing this, choreographing the entire change, and I guess the usual stuff of empowering people and mobilizing the movement forward, because it's not going to be an overnight thing. So digital transformation might be the context. The leadership role will be exactly the same with any major change in an organization, whether that's restructuring, repositioning in the marketplace, or any other. But they need to have some clarity about what that means.
Fantastic. Thank you for answering that. So Sabine, people at Right Place support organizations in different cultures in leadership development. What do the organizations have in common? Are there any patterns that you can find during the years of your experience that you've seen? Mute.
Now it's working, right?
Yep, yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
Welcome.
But unfortunately, we can't see you, Sabine. Can you switch on your cam, please?
Can I switch on?
Your camera. We cannot see you. We can only see your picture.
I know, I can see her.
The camera is on. The camera is on.
Well.
Yeah. So try to, thank you, Basila. Actually, let's bring it from that point that the digital age needs agile and flexible structures and processes that allows employees to live a trial and error culture. And this is the only way, from my point of view, to remain competitive and to be on the cutting edge, and at the same time to remain attractive as an employer. This might not be so easy to implement, and a lot of organizations struggle with it. I could observe this in many cultures and countries where I operate. Organizations who are already started to work on culture of trust and a servant leadership culture might be a step ahead, although a steamship is also more difficult to move fast. So small businesses can compensate this and react more flexible. So what many organizations have in common is a certain type of culture that has been shaped over many decades. Structures and processes, actually everything we have developed during the industrial age, and let's face it, they are hindering us in the digital age. And this imprint has passed into unwritten laws and triggered unconscious behavior and patterns.
That's quite interesting. So you're talking about structures and processes. But what do you mean exactly by structures and processes?
Let's give me a sample. For example, hierarchical structures are useful for mass production, clear processes, and clear structures. But they are by no means useful for innovation, agility, and the needed speed. So the management style, which is beneficial to hierarchical structures, is a hindrance in the digital age. I would rather even say harmful. So therefore, we developed a PARP model where you can design each transformation process and to be able to think through each step and the consequences it will have on organization and on people. So it's actually designed to ensure sustainable transfer effectiveness. So what we have seen in so many organizations is that participants enthusiastically went out of workshop, programs, or classroom. But after a few days, when they came back, the flood of emails, business trips, although this only point might be really the past, bureaucratical duties and irrelevant meetings brought them back to their old habits. So what we need to develop, from my point of view, is the important leadership skill, learn to unlearn, and make room for new perspective and for trial and error experiences. So the real change and the impact, in my eyes, is only given if we internalize the newly acquired knowledge. So when it comes to digital transformation and nurturing structures that we can immediately put them into practice.
Yeah, really interesting. So in summary, I would say learn to unlearn as leaders and everyone in the organization. Not all organizations like the whole trial and error. They don't like making mistakes, as we as humans don't like making mistakes. So that's quite an interesting perspective about the whole trial and error experience. And they say you learn from your mistakes, right? So, and that's part of the process. And then
I will talk tomorrow about this failure culture more in detail in my speech, but in tomorrow, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So the attendees should look forward to that and attend that. I'm just now going to move on to Ahmed. So you've heard from Saqib, Joe, and Sabine as the leader of people. So from your perspective, what are your views on responsibility and the role of leadership?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on this Digital Transformation Summit today. Now, in direct contemplation of the question put forth for my consideration, I propose that we construe this issue of leadership and the digital transformation from two different spectrums, the issues and then the propounding solutions to that. Now, it goes without saying that the corporate sector today is facing unprecedented levels of transformation, and that is both at a micro level and at a macro level. Now, it has been reiterated at many instances that in subsequent years, while most of the so it has been reiterated at many instances that in subsequent years, while most of the businesses will be digital or they will have transformed, or the digital transformations will be underway, efforts of very few will in actual be viewed and reflected upon as successful and profitable in terms of businesses. Now, in regards to the readiness of the leadership towards digital transformation, there is a number of factors that needs to be considered in a simultaneous manner. So while at the London School of Economics, I was attending a lecture on innovation in digital ecosystems, and what I gathered from there was that one of the reasons that why businesses are not able to adhere to this digital transformation in an efficient manner is because of the fundamental nature of having to run simultaneously various different groups. And then very often, by facilitating one side business, then might upset the other. So consideration has to be taken that there should be a balance in regards to the standpoint of the organizations. Now, my contention here is that social norms are a major factor that dictate how this digital transformation has to go on. So it is the kind of culture that has been cultivated in the organizations over time. And then that social norms would then lead to obscurities. Now, as per the social norms, there is one incentive and there is one initiative that might be accepted in the European countries, but might not be accepted in Muslim countries. So this balance has to be observed, and leadership needs to therefore realize that an effective customer journey is reliant on the integration of new technologies and algorithms. Now, as a corporate barrister, and speaking on behalf of the legal discipline in particular, judges, for example, they essentially being the highest in the layers of the law, the highest in the layers of the legal discipline, they have clearly resisted the intrusion of technology in solving the matters of the courts and to resolve cases. So there is a gap that exists in this discipline and in this subject matter.
Wow, that was very interesting and great to get the sort of legal side to this as well and to understand that. So thank you for your value add and your point. Do we still have Saqib online?
No, Sakib has left actually.
He has left? Okay, no problem. So I will now move on to Joe then. So Joe, what from the UK? So what do you see as the biggest challenges for organizations? Because, you know, when we all talk about digital leadership and digital transformation, we always about opportunities, and it's always great to see the glass half full rather than half empty, to be positive. But we can't also be naive on the challenges that sometimes organizations face. So what, in your perspective, what do you see as the biggest challenges?
I would agree completely with Sabine's point. The biggest challenge any organization faces is having the appropriate culture and social norms or organizational norms to actually fully execute their strategy, never mind a digital transformation. And alongside that, and I think it's a component part of it actually, is just the leadership capability. I mean, one of the things that Sabine mentioned earlier on is we're in the fourth industrial revolution, which is all about technology, being led by a whole demography and leadership age group where they were raised up in the third industrial revolution, and their norms and patterns of behavior are very ingrained. And the speed of just the market change that organizations have to respond to is a big issue. So, when we talk about creating organizational and leadership agility, there are some fundamental capabilities that they just have to develop. And they are the barriers that exist. I think there's another issue which is to do with leadership and management. Very often, in my experience, my 30 years of working with organizational change in a variety of sectors globally, it's really interesting, I think, that even when you've got very forward-looking, go-getting, very, very senior executive, C-suite executive level leadership, the sticky middle is usually where things slow down. And so, not only is there a need to build capability, there is a continuous need to sustain the message. What's the burning bridge? Why are we doing this? What's your part in it? And I think that if I just go back to the challenge in terms of that culture piece, you're going to find 4 different types of characters that are going to respond to change. You're going to have the people who kind of think, well, we had a change last week. If I just keep my head down and keep quiet, it'll pass me by, and then the next one will come along. So that's, the apathetics, if you like. You're going to have people who are more sitting on the fence, waiting to see what happens. They're kind of in favor of the requirements of digital change, and they're part of the business, but they're not quite sure how it's all going to work and what are the impacts on them, etc. And then you're going to have the resistors. So people who will have the 4,000 reasons why this thing won't work. And they'll be very strongly, very energized in actually blocking change. So part of the challenge for leaders and for the sticky middle managers is to actually develop advocates. It's people who can see benefit for the organization, benefit for themselves, and benefit generally for their colleagues, this particular way of operating, etc., and who are going to be your biggest champions of promoting the change. And I think it's when you ask Saqib who has primary responsibilities, is it the CIO or COO or even CEO? Actually, it's everyone. Everyone, once we hold on to this baton, everybody will have a role to play in making the transformation. Remember, we're not talking about a small change, we're talking about fundamental change in the way that we operate over an extended period of time. Everybody will have to have a part to play. And very often, in my experience, it requires some tough decision making by leaders about who do we want to, stay on the bus and come along this journey with us, and who do we think actually, the journey on the bus has ended for you, and you need to get off at the last stop. And we're applauding your efforts so far, but we're not going to continue the journey together.
Yeah, very, very interesting. ACCA as an organization, we're going through digital transformation as well. And it's so interesting because it is everybody has a role to play. And I think it's about, we don't like change as humans, but it's happening. I mean, I basically think about, what if somebody went into coma 10 years ago and woke up today? They wouldn't even be able to make a call with their phone. It'd be just to get around to understand the whole face recognition, how to dial, etc. And I liked your point about advocates and having champions, because that's what ACCA has done. We've got globally advocates who are the champions, who are the sort of middlemen between the CHQ and the markets, going back and forth with the information, and being positive and giving feedback as well about the sort of challenges that we're facing, everything. And so, yeah, that was a very, very interesting. Thank you for your perspective, Joe. I was reading a recent report, and in the report it said that a study that was done, 4 challenges for digital leadership readiness. And number 1 was insufficient internal skills. And you touched upon building capability there. So I'll ask Sabine this question. What are your views on this? I mean, have you seen and experienced internal skill set challenges? And if so, how have you overcome this, or how do you advise organizations to overcome this? You're on mute. Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting question, because I have a lot of experiences in hiring and assessment center and development centers from the past. So I have somehow the feeling that this digital transformation, and especially what we could realize the challenges in the current pandemic and this lockdown situation, it's actually a great chance to prevent, and I hope you don't misunderstand me, these overconfident people from dazzling, or let's say the other way around, the chance that we are less dazed. So we tend to trust and prefer people who are particularly self-confident and respond to a certain optical stereotype. So when we focus on certain skill set and behaviors, what matters, then we will hire people with skills we really need. So what we have done as People at Right Place, we work a lot with natural science, and we incorporate them into our work. So for the past 10 years, I would say, I have been intensively involved in neuroscience and examined our brain and how it works and the decision-making processes. By the way, did you know that we make 95% of all our decisions unconsciously? So it's actually for me a great opportunity if we could turn off our subjective, judgmental mind, and actually bring the right people into our organizations. I think this is an opportunity for all of us. So we work with personality inventory, which is in the contrast to the tools available on the market. So it's not based on psychology, so it's based on chemistry. And we use this so that we can find out the uniqueness in the people, and because we need this diversity in the digital age. And it's not only the right skill set. What is also important is what framework do these individual people need to reach their peak performance? So knowing this makes the life of many leaders smoother. I'm convinced, and I've seen it in some organizations already.
Fantastic. Thank you. Ahmed, so working across many organizations and roles, do you think leaders are ready for digital transformation, and are they willing to accept the new ways of working?
See, we are at such a stage today that leaders simply do not have access to any other recourse in this respect, and that is my submission. Now, the leadership has willingly and unwillingly accepted the fact that they have to observe and construct digital transformation strategies in their businesses and companies. Now, the only remedy to the issues is that it is essential to the successful running of businesses that there is adherence to these strategies of digital transformation. Now, I would again reiterate the fact from the perspective of law. Now, as being a corporate law officer of the legal systems of the UK and now of the Pakistan, and working across many law firms and barristers' chambers, I have observed this one thing in particular. I have observed that somewhere in the abstract, leadership now does realize that there is a dire need of social transformation. For instance, pertaining to the unprecedented times due to the COVID-19, justice is now being done in some places in the UK by way of virtual courts. There are lawyers and judges, as well as the claimant and the defendant, and the criminals all attending the courts virtually. So there are arguments being done virtually by the lawyers, to which the judge listens to virtually, and then that follows with an order of punishment, which is also received virtually by the offender, at times directly from the prison. So essentially, leadership needs to understand that leadership and businesses are currently on a discovery mission. There are massive and rapid technological advancements at this point in time. So my contention put forth, therefore, is that there is a dire need for the modification of organizational structures from the grassroots level. And organizations and leadership is now willingly or unwillingly, as I said before, it is realizing this fact that there is no recourse other than that available to them.
That's it. Thank you. Sorry, I think the internet keeps cutting out. I think Ghulam's online, and so instead of I've got one question I could ask you. Are you online?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah. So what is your perspective? Do you think leaders are ready for digital transformation, and are they willing to accept new ways of working? What's your view here?
Thank you very much, Fazila, and I'm thankful to all the panel members for joining this wonderful discussion. It's a very important discussion. When it comes to digital transformation, it begins from the top leadership. We also have some questions waiting for us in the question and answer section, and the people are asking, what is the first step to go for digital transformation? And I tell you, you cannot transform your organization if your leadership is not transformed yet. So they are the first people who bring the idea of change in the organization. And then they are the people who make sure that your culture in the organization is ready to accept the change. And they are the people who are actually allocating the budget to the teams for this whole, the budget, the money. If they don't have money available in their pockets, and they always say that we want change in our organization, and they're not allocating any kind of budgets to this IT initiative. So I don't believe we can transform the organization. So to ensure this whole process, the leadership, first of all, they should know what is the change, what is the solution available in market, and what sort of solution should come in their organization. For example, as an employee, if I go to top management and I tell them these are my problems, so they will always look it from the perspective of organizational goals. And when the organization is setting their long-term goals, so they always have to see how technology can assist in achieving those goals in a more productive and more short and more cost-effective manner. So that's my input from this perspective, that they are the leaders in change. They are the leaders in culture changing. And if they are not willing, and if they don't know the use of technology or the business transformation, so I tell you, this whole process is going in a vain. So for that particular reason, so we need to transform our leaders first. So that's the job of Mr. Joyce Pana, Sabine, and Mr. Ahmad. So they are the people who basically transform people. They change people. They change their mindset. They change the technology. They change the behaviors. They change the cultures. And if any of these things is missing, because it works one by one. Leadership, culture, operations is all together. So if any of these things is missing, so you cannot run the show. Your whole process of automation is going to fail.
If we see a recurring theme that's coming in, and many of you have been talking about culture. So, and that's the most important thing, right? The culture is what needs to change and evolve and be looked at. But being a typical accountant, I am an ACCA member myself. Before I went into this role, I do love numbers though, right? So I am an accountant. Where does budget come from for digital transformation then? So, are all the directors, CEOs, CEOs, COOs, all of them, are they willing to allocate budgets to digital transformation initiatives? I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the money. Right? Where is it coming from? And are they willing to do that? If I could ask Joe that question, and the same question I'm going to ask Sabine and Ahmed, because I want to see all of your different perspectives.
So before you ask this question, I want to add one thing. ROI is the first thing. I read a statement, an HR manager, he went to to finance head for budget for a training. And the chief and the CFO, the chief financial officer, he said that what happens if we train the people and they leave the organization? So whole spending is over. And then he replied, what happens if we don't train them and they stay in the organization? So what will happen? So same thing, I think Sabine and Ahmad Saab and Mr. Joe, they can explain. So over to you. Sorry for using.
Thank you, Ghulam. Thank you for stepping in for Zafar. Good.
That's a great point, Ghulam. So my view on this is a pretty simple one: is that organisations don't decide to transform digitally because they think that it's a good idea. It's part and parcel of some strategic intent. And so as they're developing their strategy and they realize that in order to compete effectively in their particular market sector or whatever, that the light bulb switched on and said, well, actually, we've got to think differently about how we operate and improve our digitalization or our whole deployment of how we use technology internally and in terms of our external offering. As soon as that's decided, then the budgetary process falls out of that. Really, what are the goals that are strategic goals that they're trying to achieve, and then that they will have those fights, at the C-suite level in terms of budget allocation. But that for me would be the process. I think there's a bigger question right up front though, is that trying to answer that question: why are we doing this? Why do we think it's a good idea? And frankly, are we all committed to it? Because the fights about who's where money is going to be deployed will fall out of that conversation.
Thank you, Joe. Sabine, your perspective?
Yeah. So actually, Agreeing with Joe, and at the same time, I want to bring another perspective. For me, it's not the question of where do the money come from. For me, it's a question, do I want to survive or do I want to die? So I don't believe that there is any, that organizations who want to have a sustainable future can choose and say, do I want to spend the money or not? So I do believe that if you don't transform, and transformation is from natural science perspective, an ongoing process, step by step. So it's not said that you need to search for a huge amount of budget to make one big project. It's an ongoing process. So it's a permanent work to transform, as this is how we as humans also transform. We transform every day. If we would not change in small steps and pieces, then we are then we must be dead. There is no other way in nature. So I think it's not the question where the money comes from. I think it's the question of, do I want to survive and how do I want to live in prosper and in a sustainable manner or not?
Sorry to interrupt, Fazila. Can we conclude in 5 minutes so we can open for questions? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If it conclude the panel discussion, or shall we ask the questions now?
If you're done,
I've got one last question.
Yeah.
And then we can go to the question and answer.
Yeah.
So, one last statement from all of you that you would like to give to the audience and conference participants. Ahmed.
In regards to digital transformation, firstly, I would reiterate the position held by my colleague Sabine that only the strong survives. So this is a competitive world we're living in. And hence, we need to formulate strategies so as to ensure that there is digital transformation in effect in an efficient manner. Now, most of the organizations now do realize that they need to have a fixed budget for such IT components and digital transformations. So there is a need of developing and changing their procedures. And I do see companies contemplating upon this aspect now.
Fabulous, thank you. And what's your last statement that you'd like to share with everyone?
It was just my corporate and legal views that I was presenting. Otherwise, it was a pleasure to be a part of the summit today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ahmed. Joe?
Yeah, I'd keep it simple. I mean, I'm going to work on the basis of the assumption that anybody participating in this conference is thinking that digital transformation is absolutely critical to our future success. So for leaders, my final statement would be build and communicate a super clear and compelling vision, and then do absolutely everything at all levels in the organization to engage your people in that vision. That would be my statement.
Fabulous. Yeah, great. Love that. Sabine?
Yes. My last statement would go to the whole audience, and because I'm addressing all, not only leaders. I believe we need more than ever transformers. What do I mean by that? I mean, first, people who are constantly learn to unlearn. Second, people who dare to leave familiar patterns and status behind. And third, people who are willing to adopt new ways of thinking and acting. So I believe that when people and places, so the people working in the organization and the organization with the structures and the processes, when they are aligned, then organizations become attractive and a place of joy and visible sustainability. And I guess who wouldn't want to work and develop in such a climate and culture? So I definitely do. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So as we can see from our panel discussion, there's a balance of responsibilities for digital transformation. It lies across the board. And as Joe said, everyone, it's a role for everyone. It's not just the CIO or the CFO or the CTO or the CEO. Digital transformation is now a necessity for every industry. And as Sabine said, it's about survival. Redefining business models is a high-risk strategy Doing nothing, however, is a far bigger risk and one that is sure to fail. So to ensure readiness, leaders therefore need to disrupt their own models, and they need to think about the business strategy and the digital strategy have got to be the same. And you can see from our panel, that's what they also was talking about. Lastly, knowledge is power, right? Transformation is led from the top. So bringing everyone together, working towards the same goal. And it's up to leaders to define the goal, as what you've just heard Joe and Sabine and Ahmed said. Set out the path to it, invigorate and excite the entire organization in the pursuit of that goal. That is what digital readiness at its best. I will now pass over to Zaina for any questions that the attendees have for you to be able to read them out to the panelists.
Zina, can you allow me to take control of the questions, please?
Yeah.
The reason is that we have lots of questions, but as you know, we're starting a little late. The next panel is also waiting.
I chose
only
three
one of them, please. Only one of them, please.
Okay, so what's the difference between digital transformation versus a human transformation in the new norms? So who would like to answer this question?
I think Ahmad and Joe, they both are most relevant people for this, as per my understanding. I might be wrong.
Or what's the cheapest way to start this process?
Don't start it.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the first question. I think that any transformation, as Sabine said, starts with the individual. So I don't think it's an either or. The technology and what you're trying to achieve through the technology is if you like, the tool, if you like. But like any new process, new piece of equipment, and everything else, if you can't get people to want to willingly participate and see that there is a newer, better, whatever the thing is, way of operating that they find personal fulfillment through. Human beings are not machines, and I think it just starts with the human being. So creating a culture where fail fast, learn lots, unlearn, learn lots, and be different. I have a very simple view in my own mind about myself, for example. I always think that I've been doing a 30-year apprenticeship. So hopefully what I know now is probably not the same as year one. And so I'm not the same version of me as I was in year one. So I would say it's the human element's always, any enterprise ultimately is a human enterprise. And so, I think start there.
Excellent. I think what we need to do is if you guys can put on chat all your LinkedIn links, anyone who's got a question can actually get in touch with you and ask you for more, because we have a lot of them and we need to jump to the other panel because we're late already. Thank you so much, Fazila, for the amazing moderation, and for Sabine, and for Joe, and for Ahmad. Thank you so much for being here, and it's my pleasure.
Thank you very much for joining us. And let me share only one last thing. That Mr. Ahmad Mohsin, he is working on Quranic exegesis. So he's translating the whole Quran in English, and also the exegesis of Quran. And that is also a big source for every humankind on the earth for you can say human transformation. And those who cannot understand, Urdu or Arabic, they can take reference of the English version of Quranic exegesis. So I shared the link in the chat area, in the discussion area, so you can join from there. The YouTube channel over there, all the video of Quranic exegesis are available, so you can take benefit out of that. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. And let's move to the next room, please. So we are moving all of you to the next room. The attendees and also are guest speakers of the next room. Yes, Gina, over to you.
The next room. So we are going to the second one, putting the customer experience at the digital center of transformation. Which one is it? Digital Senator?